If everything fell apart tomorrow, if the plans you trusted failed you by morning, if the doors you prayed would open slammed shut without explanation, would you still believe that God knows what He is doing? This story begins at the exact moment doubt becomes loud, when silence from heaven feels like abandonment, and when a man stands at the edge of his own disappointment wondering if faith was a mistake. This is not a gentle story. It is a necessary one. And if you listen closely, it may change the way you interpret every delay, every loss, and every unanswered prayer for the rest of your life. Jonah Elric believed in God, but quietly, carefully, the way people believe when they don't want to be disappointed. He was not rebellious or bitter. He was responsible. He planned his life like a checklist. Graduate on time. Build a career. Support his family. Serve God honestly. He did everything right, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. He prayed before decisions. He avoided shortcuts. He showed up when it was hard. And because of that, he believed that things would eventually work out in a straight line. What Jonah did not understand yet was that God rarely works in straight lines. And when life bent sharply in the opposite direction, Jonah felt betrayed. The job he had worked toward for years disappeared a week before his start date. The relationship he thought would lead to marriage ended without warning. His savings vanished into medical bills for his father. In less than a year, Jonah lost stability, certainty, and confidence. He still prayed, but the prayers felt heavy. He still believed, but belief started to sound like denial. He began to wonder if God had forgotten him, or worse, if God was teaching him a lesson he did not deserve. What hurt Jonah most was not the loss itself, but the timing. Everything collapsed at once. There was no space to recover, no time to regroup. Each setback felt intentional, like divine silence with purpose. People told him to be patient. They told him God had a plan. Those words used to comfort him. Now they irritated him. If God had a plan, Jonah thought, it felt poorly designed. He did not ask for luxury. He asked for direction. He did not ask for ease. He asked for clarity. And what he received instead was confusion layered on confusion. There were nights he lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision he had made, asking himself where he went wrong. He examined his faith the same way a person examines a cracked mirror, looking for the moment it shattered. And slowly, without realizing it, Jonah began to measure God's goodness by outcomes. When things went well, God was faithful. When things fell apart, God was distant. This was the quiet mistake that almost broke him. One afternoon, Jonah took a long walk with no destination. He passed places that reminded him of who he used to be. The cafe where he once studied with confidence. The park where he planned his future. The church where he once felt certain of his calling. None of them felt familiar anymore. He sat on a bench and finally said out loud what he had been afraid to admit. I don't understand you. I don't trust this process. I don't see the point. The words surprised him, not because they were rebellious, but because they were honest. And in that honesty, something shifted, not immediately, not dramatically, but subtly. Jonah realized that his faith had been built on expectations. Not surrender, he trusted God to deliver results. Not to guide his character, he believed God would bless the plan, not rewrite it. And now that the plan was gone, he felt lost, because he had tied his identity to outcomes instead of obedience. Weeks passed. Jonah took temporary work he never imagined himself doing. The pay was modest. The hours were long. The pride hit harder than the exhaustion. But something unexpected happened in that season. He met people he would never have encountered otherwise. He learned patience in environments where no one praised effort. He learned humility when his resume meant nothing. He learned compassion by watching others survive without options. And slowly, without realizing it, Jonah was being reshaped, not promoted, not rewarded, reshaped. He began to notice that his prayers changed. They were no longer about timelines. They were about endurance. They were no longer about control. They were about trust. He still did not understand the full picture, but he began to sense that the delay was not punishment. It was preparation. One evening, Jonah visited his father in the hospital. His father, weakened but clear-eyed, asked him a simple question. "Are you angry at God?" Jonah hesitated, then nodded. His father smiled gently and said something Jonah would never forget. Sometimes God answers prayers by changing the person who is praying, not the situation. That sentence landed like a weight and a release at the same time. Jonah realized that if his original plans had succeeded, he would have remained the same person, confident, capable, but shallow in trust. He would have believed in God's blessings more than God's wisdom. He would have praised the result without understanding the process. And in that moment, Jonah saw something clearly for the first time. God was not delaying his life. God was deepening it. Months later, an opportunity appeared that did not look impressive at first glance. It was not the job Jonah had dreamed of. It was not the position he had trained for. But it aligned with the person he had become. It required empathy. It required resilience. It required faith without guarantees. Jonah said yes, not because it was perfect, but because it felt purposeful. And in that decision, peace returned. Not excitement. Not certainty. Peace. He understood now that God's plan does not always feel good in the moment. It feels right in hindsight. It makes sense later. It connects dots you could not see while walking through the fog. Looking back, Jonah could trace every setback to a skill he needed. Every closed door to a distraction that would have delayed him further. Every heartbreak to a lesson that strengthened his discernment. God had not ignored him. God had guided him quietly, patiently, firmly, through discomfort. Jonah stopped asking why things happened and started asking what they were shaping him to become. And that question changed everything. He learned that faith is not trusting God when the plan makes sense. Faith is trusting God when it doesn't. Faith is not confidence in outcomes. It is confidence in character. In God's character. If you are listening to this and you are in a season where nothing makes sense, where prayers feel unanswered, where progress feels reversed, hear this clearly. Delay is not denial. Silence is not absence. Confusion is not chaos in God's hands. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. God's plan often unfolds in reverse, breaking what you depend on so you can depend on Him. And when the time is right, when you are ready, not when you are comfortable, clarity will come. Never doubt God's plan, not because life will be easy, but because God is faithful. Not because you understand, but because He does. The story is not over. The chapter you are in is not the conclusion. And one day, you will look back and realize that the season you begged to escape was the season that saved you.